Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for our Make It Mondays program, Quilting 101. So, imagine that you're a child living on Mulford Farm in East Hampton, and the year is 1850. Your life is surrounded by chores on the farm, and extra time is spent at school and at church. If you were a boy, you're helping your father on the farm, and if you were a girl, you're helping your mother inside the home with cooking, taking care of your younger brothers and sisters, and sewing. And sewing included spinning wool from sheep to make yarn for weaving and stitching clothes. Life is hard, but the farm is growing food and flax, and resources are beginning to be developed to help you have a better life. Quilting would have provided warmth and comfort and decoration for your home. Quilted fabric was used for clothing as well as beds, and quilting also brought communities together. When stitching a full size quilt, a quilting frame was used and it could take up a lot of space. After an early American woman finished her quilt top, she would gather her friends and neighbors together for a quilting bee. The quilting frame would be left up until the women finished the quilting. Quilting bees were a cherished event where women could visit and talk and share stories with one another. By this time, the textile industry was expanding and fabric was more available. Thrifty women would cut apart and gather what little pieces of fabric they could to produce beautiful designs in their quilts. Early American quilting required a lot of labor and careful piecing and many complex stitches, and women reveled in the difficulties of patchwork quilting. And many women today still enjoy these intricacies. Others simply enjoy patchwork part and use a sewing machine to do the quilting. And there are many varied quilt patterns as well as names for them, and you can continue this early American tradition of hand quilting by making some of these beginning projects. So first, you should have purchased the beginning quilting kit off of our website. This is available for $10. So you're going to go ahead and snip that open and take out the pieces and lay them out. And the kit came with several things. It came with a needle and some thread, and it came with a large piece of quilting and some muslin, as well as instructions. And then it also came with quite a few pieces of the patterns itself. From home, you're going to need a ruler, a pencil, a scissor, perhaps some straight pins or extra needles if you have them, just to tack things in place. And we're going to work through one of the projects together to make our own pot holder. So the first time I went ahead and tried to make a pot holder, it came out looking like this. And then the second time I did it, it came out looking like this, much neater, and I learned from my mistakes, so I hope to pass those along to you so that the first time around we can make a really nice pot holder. So go ahead and gather those items, put me on pause, and meet me back here, and we'll go ahead and we're going to make our own quilted pot holder together. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is select the patterns with which you want your pot holder to have. So we're going to do a pot holder with just 2 pieces of pattern work and 4 triangles. So go ahead and select those. And then on the back with your ruler and your pen and pencil, you're going to draw a line from the opposite diagonal. So you have 2 triangles. You're going to draw that line on either side. As you can see, I kind of made a little mistake there. I didn't exactly get it perfect, but that's okay, it's on the back. You're gonna go ahead and draw those lines and then cut those in half so that we're going to have 4 triangles. Go ahead. So from tip to tip, cut 1, and then go ahead and cut the other. Okay. Now, you're going to want to lay these out. I'm going to do them down on my table first, that you can see. You're going to want to put opposite triangles together so that they make a square. going to do it here and then lift it up for you. So you're going to want to work in this pattern so that opposite each other, they're the same. Okay. So configure your pieces in front of you like this. Hold them up there so that you can see. So inside, smallest points and opposites are the same. Now, I should have said at the beginning that Basic 101, I hope that we're all able to thread a needle and not thread at the end, because we're going to be doing a lot of stitch work. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is take 2 of the triangles that are adjacent to each other, get your needle ready, and you're going to stitch along one of the sides where they were adjacent. So go ahead, we're going to thread a needle and start those stitches. Okay, so again, you're going to take 2 of the triangles that are together, and we're just going to sew along this edge where they're adjacent with a very close running stitch. So when you piece them together, you want to make sure that the pattern side's on the inside. We want to be working on the outside. So I just try to line them up as close as I can. And when I have my needle and thread, I just try to estimate to make sure that I have enough thread to make it through whatever length of fabric I'm going to be stitching. So just an easy running stitch. So just up and down as tight as you can. And you're just going to go along the length of one of the shorter sides that they're adjacent. Okay. So I just did my simple running stitch, which is just in, out, in, out, in, out along the length of the 2 pieces together. So this is what it should look like. Patterns on the inside. You're going to open it up, and then you're going to place it back down, whoops, so that it fits back into the pattern that we have. So you can see, here's the side that I just stitched together. And now I'm going to take the other 2 opposite, which are still unstitched, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take those 2 pieces, fold them together, and then stitch, running stitch along the length here. So here I have my second set of triangles running stitched together close at the top. With the patterns on the inside, and then when you open it up you have a larger triangle. So if you fit these 2 pieces together like this, now you're going to have your square, which will be the top of the pot holder that we're going to make. So what you can do is you take it like this, you fold it over, and you can pin these together. And now you're going to want to stitch again across the top, across the long side, so that when this opens up, it'll be a larger square. So you can go ahead and pin these together. And again, stitch it along the long side so that all 4 triangles, we connected them into 2 larger triangles, and now we're going to connect them into 1 square. Go ahead and do that. Okay. So again, we did the running stitch along the top so that all 4 of our triangles are together. And when you open them up, you should have your pattern like this. So the 2 similar sides opposite each other. Now in my first craft, I made the mistake of not putting my triangles opposite each other, and this is how it turned out. And it just isn't as pretty as when you have them similar sides across from each other. So now you probably have a lot of extra strings kind of trailing off and thread that you want to trim off. So go ahead and do that. Take your scissor and just anything that's sticking out, any of your knots that you want to trim off, any of the pattern pieces that have extra strings around, just want to trim that and make sure we get this as neat as possible. Some of it you'll be able to tuck in as we go, but it's just best to have a neat surface to start with. So we're going to open this back up and we're going to take a piece of the quilting. This came in a larger piece, and you're going to put your pattern on top of that. And what you want to do is cut a piece of quilting that's the same size as your pattern. So you just want to trim whatever size you're working with, just trim it so that your pattern is laying on top of the same size piece of quilting. You don't want this to be any larger than your pattern piece. So you can take your ruler and measure out, like trace along the straight line so that's the same size. And I'll meet you back here. Okay, so now you have your piece of quilting, should be the same size as your piece of fabric. And you want to make them the same size because when we're doing the quilting, we're going to be essentially doing the same stitch or running stitch all around the edge. And we want to make sure we go through this piece of fabric plus the quilting as we're doing the stitch. So that's why it's important to make sure we get them the same size. And then you're going to take your piece of muslin and when you cut that, you're going to want to make sure that you have about an inch extra muslin on all four sides of your quilting. So I just trimmed this down, but I'm going to trim it down again. And you want to make sure that you have that extra muslin on the end because we're going to be folding it over as we do the stitch. So this is actually a piece that's folded over from the back and then stitched around on the front. The first time I did this craft, I did not allow for the extra muslin and it got a little tight and it's just not as nice as a border. It's just not as neat. So you want to give yourself a good inch around the edge so that we're able to do this nice fold over and stitch. So I think that I've actually cut my piece a little too small. This needs a little bit more of a border around it. So take your muslin out, put your fabric and your quilting on top of it, and cut yourself a square that gives yourself an inch around. Okay, so I've actually cut now a more appropriate sized piece of muslin that gives me a solid inch around each edge of my perimeter. Now, you're going to want to lay again, you have your pattern design over your quilting, and then you're going to put that in the center of the muslin, and you can pin all of that together. I'm actually going to hold it up for you to show you what we're going to do now. So even if you cut an edge that isn't perfectly neat or perfectly straight, that's okay. You're going to take each edge and fold it once to the edge of the pattern, and then fold it again over the edge of the pattern. So we'll do that again. Get your pattern and your quilting in the center of your muslin. Take the edge of the muslin, fold it once to the edge of your pattern, and then fold it again over your pattern. And then this is going to be what you stitch. So you can pin this together, and then you're going to start at one end, come in from the bottom, and then do the same running stitch along the top. And when you thread your needle for this, you want to make sure that you have, again, a good enough length to make sure that you're going to be able to go across the entire edge. You're going to stop at this corner, and then we're going to do the next edge of the perimeter down. Okay, how'd you do? So take a look. This is my first edge with everything quilted together. A couple of tips. So you just want to make sure that you have sewn all three pieces together, that you're catching the pattern and the quilting and the muslin together in your stitch. And I'm sure that you've noticed that the smaller the stitch, the more thread that you're going to need. And you definitely want to try to keep your stitches straight towards the bottom of the fold of the muslin. And it's okay if you didn't, and if you wanted to cut the thread out and try that side again, you can. There's plenty of thread to do this several times, so no need to worry about that. After you finish one edge, you're going to turn it over and then do the same thing. Take the muslin and fold it towards the top of your pattern and then fold it over again. And then pin that, and you're gonna sew along that edge there. Now, you could see that I didn't exactly do a perfect job of making sure that my muslin was the same on all sides around. This side is quite a little bit thicker than this side. So I'm gonna go ahead and just trim a little bit of this so that when I do the double fold, it's the same size edge, and then I'm gonna sew along that top seam there. Now I have my two sides completed, and we're just going to continue to work our way along the third and fourth side. Again, folding the muslin to the edge and then folding it over and then stitching along that side, and you pin it down as you go. So this is how my front is looking so far. This is how my back is looking so far. And you may have noticed that in your corners, you're going to have an extra little bit of fabric there as you continue just to fold it down and make the square. So what I have done is I just take that edge and tuck it in so that it kind of continues the triangle, and then I just do a little tuck here with my needle just so that it finishes it, or else you'll have like a blunt corner on either side. So you can go ahead and do that. You can either do it as you go or wait until you do that at the end, but you can continue with the third and fourth side just in the same way we've been doing it, with a simple running stitch across. I've made my way around each of the edges. This is how I look on the front. This is how I look on the back, just a simple running stitch. So I've tucked in two of my corners. You can see down here, I've tucked them in, and up top this is unfinished. So again, what I do is I just fold it in, make it a little like triangle up there, and then again I just do two stitches from the back to the front. So I'm going to finish my two corners here that I haven't finished yet. We'll come back to the finished product. And here you have it, your basic quilted pot holder or coaster. This is how mine came out in front and the back. Your last step is going to be to take your scissor and just snip any of those long pieces of thread that you have from any of your knots. There's probably some in the back and maybe a couple in the front. Just want to trim those. Make sure to not cut your knots, or you'll have to stitch the whole side over again. And here you have it. So I hope that you enjoyed making this craft with me today. And every time that you look at a quilt, maybe you've seen some of ours up at Mulford Farm, or perhaps you have some that have been given to you by members of your family, your grandmothers or great-grandmothers that maybe are sitting in your attic. Time to take them out and take a look at them and appreciate the work and the intricacy that goes along with making one. Now, I'll be doing the Make It Mondays program every final Monday of the month, so join me again in April as we come together to learn a new skill and make a new craft together. And if you've tried out this program and you want to send me a photograph of how your coaster or pot holder came out, I hope that you do. As always, you can email me at info@easthamptonhistory.org, and I'll see you next time.